Oh, my Lord.
Nah, I feel lucky to be down here, so.
We can start.
It's going.
recording. Okay. And the first item on the meeting is being called to order at 7:02 p.m. and the regular members here are Phil West, Hannah Tamel, James Laporta, and Keith Bodwell. We will seat Bruce Bennett, right? So we have a quorum, and Will Evans will not be seated, which means, Will, for your benefit, that you can participate in all the discussions, but you may not vote. All right?
All right, sounds good.
The first item on the agenda is that I would like to ask for a motion to amend the agenda. And the motion will sound something like this. We're going to amend the agenda to add a public comment period at the end of the meeting. Now, I don't see any public yet, but they may join us. The public comment period will be for a maximum of 30 minutes. Each speaker will have a chance to make a comment, hopefully the duration being less than 3 minutes each. The comments will not be recorded. And Richard, you're going to have to turn off the recording for public comment period, because this is not a public hearing. Public commentary is not testimony that should be recorded. That might be complicated for you. Can you do that? Richard? Well, he went away or something. He'll be back. We'll tell him.
Janelle, maybe hit the recording button then, you think?
It's currently recording right now.
Or maybe he walked away with it. Okay, we'll have to work out that kink that I had not thought about ahead of time about not recording comments, since they're not part of a public record per se. I'm hoping that this will be something we do for every meeting so that people can feel as if they're participating. People will be told that they are not allowed to make comments about specific applications or any pending special permit meetings. And if they have questions they want answered, for the sake of accurately answering those questions, we will ask that they be in writing so we can consider the answers and document them and store them. So I'm proposing that for this agenda and all future agendas. And now, if someone could propose it and second it, we can discuss that.
So moved.
Thank you, James.
I'll second.
Thank you, Phil. Any discussion? Need to think a sec.
Anna, just to ask a technical question, does the town rely on Richard's recording to be put on the website? Is that how that works?
When we have Richard's recording goes on the website, but we still have minutes for our regular meetings, any meetings.
Mm-hmm.
When we have a special hearing, that has to be recorded on an audio that Karen has to have available in her office. So Karen, you do a separate recording, do you not?
Yeah. I have to only technically, before COVID-19, I really only had to record public hearings.
Yeah.
As opposed to whole meetings. So they have to be kept, for a certain amount of time, and in case there's an appeal.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have a question. Just, is it okay for us to ask that it not be recorded, this public comment period? Aren't our meetings open to the public? If somebody wants to record them, that's up to them.
Well, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. I just want to make sure that people who make comments understand that they're not considered testimony per se. They're just our neighbors weighing in. So
It's a free discussion
don't-
period at the end.
yeah, and I don't necessarily want Karen to feel obligated to write down all those comments in detail in the minutes. But I guess I have no problem if they're recorded and put on the website. We
Yeah.
don't need to maybe mess with Richard turning things off.
Yeah, it actually almost makes it sound worse. We're
Right,
like
we want you to
deliberately-
talk, but we don't care to record what you're saying. I think we'll find a way maybe on our agendas, to put that into words. So we're gonna have a public comment period, but we're going to let people know what the parameters are, and we can find a way to word that so it doesn't sound off-putting, because the way I expressed it was off-putting.
So Anna, some clarification on that. So what you're saying is that at each of the meetings, and not just this meeting or the meetings involved in the zoning changes, you're asking for public comment at the end of each meeting? And my question is, will that lengthen meetings perhaps to?
Well, I understand your concern, and I have this mission to keep our meetings short, to keep them to an hour. It might at first. I think what I've told Janelle and Karen is that I want to give it a try for a while and see how it works because of this principle of transparent government. Some of us are elected officials here. So, and I believe that people should be able to speak. If you can't speak in a small town like Cornwall, there's something wrong with our democracy. The fine line is making sure we don't get all disrupted and have our meetings hijacked and everybody gets a turn to speak. So negotiating all of that may be something we just have to feel our way forward with.
Okay.
Yeah, we just don't want to make sure it doesn't get out of control where, they get hijacked and people are.
Right. So, but I mean, I'm willing to give it a shot. We have always had public comment periods during our Planning and Zoning Commission meetings in the past. They were rather informal. And sometimes the commission would engage in dialogue with the people making comments. I think if people want to have a dialogue with the commission, that they should run for a seat or volunteer to be an alternate. But people have suggestions and commentary. They may have ideas that we need to listen to.
Yeah, but at the same time, some people seem to jump in and think they need to, on non-public hearings, seem to jump in and input on every item, and it becomes
Right.
Well,
I think
that's
the
why
way
the
the commission
comment,
doing its job.
and that's
Right.
why the comment period's at the end.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is, perhaps you can trust me to keep people on a straight and narrow, not let them go off on tangents.
Well, aren't we limiting it to agenda items as well? It's not, in some fashion, we're not going to hear wetlands issues here. We're not.
No, we have to hear appropriate
Something
comments
that-
about appropriate planning and zoning commission issues.
Complaints, my neighbor. Yeah.
Right.
Are we going to limit it to so they can only comment, once during that comment period, or are they going to be able
No,
to come
I
back
don't
again
think
and
that,
again?
I don't think that that's really allowed or fair. Janelle did share with me some legal commentary about public comments. There are some states that have laws that mandate that. Connecticut doesn't have a law, but it kind of has best practices instead. And that lawyer indicated that the most important thing, if you're going to choose to have a public comment period, is that everybody has a turn, that nobody is discriminated against. Right? Because that's a violation of freedom of speech. So everybody's sitting there looking pensive since James, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
I'll try to help them.
There.
Yeah, so I was just waiting to vote on that. We got a motion and a second
Okay.
on the agenda.
All right. Discussion is coming to an end. all in favor for Christine? Are you visual or are you going to speak up? You can see Christine, so it doesn't matter. Everybody else to vote.
my internet's being a little slow, so I figure if I take it off video,
Okay.
it'll
But
work
you are-
better.
All right, you're not seated, so you're not going to vote. Okay. So everybody who can vote, who's in favor, raise your hand, please. I see 2. I see 3, and then there's me. So I guess that motion carries. We will have a public comment period at the end of this meeting and future meetings. Next item on the agenda is you have the list of zoning applications here, which is just for our information, correct, Karen? We're not going to discuss those.
Unless anybody has any questions. Commission members have any questions.
Right. Well, they got all those ahead of time. They should know whether they have any questions.
Well, nobody gets copies of the zoning permits, so you have to ask those questions of me. And they're not, and the zoning permits do not go up on the website where at another, for instance, in inland wetlands, anything that's named on the agenda, the application under the new COVID requirements would have to be up on the website prior to the meeting, but zoning permits are administrative, so it's a little bit different.
And you know, in the past, we have only discussed the ones that you bring to our attention to discuss because there's something to learn. So I'm assuming there's no questions. We're going to move on to the approval of minutes.
Ask Karen a question about the zoning permits. Does she give zoning permits on, Karen, do you give zoning permits on your own that aren't brought in front of the commission?
No,
Yes.
no, zoning permits in most, I'm going to be very honest, Cornwall is a very unique town that lists zoning permits on the agenda. In many towns in which the zoning enforcement officer is administrative, zoning permits do not show up. They're signed off and they're gone. In Cornwall, when I came to Cornwall, it's like, what is this on the agenda? But historically in Cornwall, zoning permits have been listed on the agenda and it creates a record. But I have the right to sign off before it comes to the commission.
Got it.
I can't sign off on a zoning permit if it requires a special permit. I can't sign off on it if it requires wetlands approval. So sometimes there are things that are sitting. There are some that are, I have at least 2 in my drawer that do not have Torrington Area Health approval, even though the permit has been in process for several months. So that's
Okay, you've answered it. I think Bruce understands now.
Yep.
The town pays for a zoning enforcement professional to
and
do
that-
the bulk of the work.
Got it.
Now, we've got minutes for December 8th and December 29th.
Is that Steve Sicardi that just came on?
Yes, it is. Yeah. The workshop meeting minutes were 5 single-space typewritten pages, which I went over in enormous detail with Karen. I'm assuming you've all read them with attention to every potential error. And the December 8th minutes were short and sweet.
No,
No, it was the other way around.
other way around.
Other way around. So I would have a motion to accept the minutes,
Approve.
to approve the
Move
minutes.
to approve the minutes as distributed.
Any
Second.
second?
Second.
Okay. Any amendments?
I can't tell voices.
James
That
and
was
Steve both
James.
seconded.
I thought I heard.
Call you from now on. Steve, you have an amendment?
No, I was seconding Phil.
James beat you to it. All right, all in favor, raise your hands. I like to see hands. Thank
Aye.
you.
Aye.
The motion has passed. I think we're going to say that, well, Bruce was seated for you, Steve. What do we do now, Karen?
That's fine. He can stay seated.
Because we're going on to things that if he has, he can partake in the workshop meeting, and the only other thing is that there's going to really be any discussion about correspondence and communications.
That's- That's next on the agenda. Would you please address it?
You have some correspondence that I forwarded to you earlier today that came in from David Colbert. That's should be probably made part of the planning meeting because it was directed towards the meeting. And that's pretty much, Janelle has sent some informational correspondence. If you would like me to start listing all that sort of stuff, and I'm going to bring this up under the planning meeting as well. So I'll bring up that whole issue under the planning meeting,
Sure.
which is
So
kind
do
of,
you have anything in the zoning officer's report?
nope, I do not have anything in the zoning officer's report, but as land use administrator, which I will address the annual planning meeting because that's next on the agenda.
Very good. Go
Okay.
ahead.
We are hoping to, and I say we, I talked to Gordon about this. It obviously has to be a Zoom meeting. It's going to be our annual planning meeting. We did not have one last year. We're hoping to have it in the evening, February 4th or 5th, which is a Thursday or Friday night. It's a belief that people have gotten used to having evening meetings that they can attend by Zoom. I will be, when we decide if it's the 4th or 5th, I will be sending out correspondence to all of the partners listed in the Town Plan of Conservation Development, and asking them to participate in this meeting, either during the meeting or in the way of sending correspondence that would be made part of the record of the meeting that night. But the meeting would be for us to hear from our partners as part of the Town Plan of Conservation Development to see how we are all making progress. And it's a meeting that we've had, 8 or 9 of these meetings, I think so far, 8, I guess I should say. And so I will be, with your permission, when you set a date, I will be sending out invitations and requests to all of those people and putting up as much information. The implementation task list will be up on the website. It already is. I think I will send links to it. And if there's other things that we want to put up for information, Janelle has sent some really interesting information about some of the housing issues coming up that might be something that we want to at least just post up on the website. But with your permission, this is your meeting, so you have to decide the date and process.
Well, for most people, the first Thursday or the first Friday of the month. Let's have a show of hands for people who who think Thursday would be best.
I do.
Okay, so it looks like it's going to be a Thursday.
We just do it on both.
Huh?
It's
Oh,
gonna
no,
be see, it's going to be recorded, so after that, it will be loaded up on YouTube so people could attend it. Now, it's going to be basically presentations, the question. So if it's a Thursday and try to put a 2-hour time frame starting at 7.
Well, I guess,
2 hours is long.
yeah.
That was a long time.
Our very first meeting went 3 hours.
Yeah, that was at the town hall.
Right.
We had 4.
It's a long meeting for a Zoom meeting.
Well, we're not gonna have any breakout sessions, are we?
Good God, no. Why would we?
So,
Maybe
How
we
many-
could start at 6:30.
How many other commissions are going to be there?
We don't know yet.
Um,
And anybody who was named as a potential partner in the Plan of Conservation and Development.
so that means Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance,
Cornwall Housing Corporation, Economic Development,
Conservation.
Conservation Commission.
there's quite a few of them.
And we want to make a notice about this in the Chronicle as well, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Will you take care of that, Karen?
I
Notice?
Yes, I can. Gordon, I'll call Gordon in the morning because I know he's, yeah,
So 6:30 ending by 8:30,
Yes,
maybe less
yes,
if we're lucky.
right.
I think the guideline should be, I don't think you have a dozen partners and each person or each group should speak no more than 5 minutes. And then that gives you,
Right.
you know, an hour or whatever. And then I think the big thing is for the commission and the planner to talk about the big picture of implementing the town plan and going forward. I mean, that's sort of the big, I mean, there's news out there, but that's sort of the big news of this meeting. So anyway,
Yeah,
that'd be
that's
great.
fine. I mean, I
I would
think,
think that would be the start.
sure, the first year or two, people sometimes wrote long essays, which they then read. I don't think that's what we're really interested in. Maybe when we contact them, we could figure out how to give them some guidance about, Karen, you and Gordon and I could just figure out what we want them to give us, so
right.
that we don't get more than we really want.
And if they have information that they wanted to put up on the website, for instance, the Cornwall Conservation Trust in the past has given, brought mapping forward. The mapping can always just be put up on the website.
Sure.
There other background information. And if somebody can't attend, they can put their letter, they can put something in writing. It can be made part of the record
Right.
and up on the website underneath the recording, or with links on to embed in the recording. Maybe Jonathan can help me because he's knows how to do that sort of stuff.
Okay, so we're gonna have the meeting starting at 6:30, Thursday, February 4th. We'll be inviting everybody involved in the plan of conservation and development. We'll be giving them some suggestions as to how we want them to frame their contribution. Okay, so that's settled. We're gonna move on to the workshop meeting.
Ask us one final question. We're going to limit it to presentations and not have, in the past, there has been the opportunity for the public to ask questions. I think that could make it a little bit longer meeting if you wanted to. It's really up to you.
Well,
I think you should have a public
Yeah.
thing. And I think that's the whole point of this, is to have the boards
right,
interact in one place at one time. Say,
Right.
where are we going the next year? What have we been doing?
Yeah.
And so have an hour of presentation. Some people fall asleep and then wake them up with
right.
an
With the
hour of
question.
comment, and then that's it. Everybody, same thing, 3
Yeah.
minutes. I mean, we want questions more than we want statements, but if people want to make a statement, thinking we should all speak Swedish or whatever they want to say, they can just let it go on.
That sounds fine. I agree with that.
Anna, I just had one thought for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Did you want me to prepare a presentation that would essentially give an overview of the rewrite and how we're using the POCD to guide us?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be wonderful.
Perfect, great. And
Yeah.
I'll, of course, send a draft your way to make sure that we're all on the
Sure.
same page.
That's wonderful. Okay. I think a lot of those past meetings left everybody feeling really good. We were full of enthusiasm for all the good work that good people are doing in town. And I want to generate that same feeling without a 3 to 4 hour long meeting. So that should be our goal, right? Now, can I move on to the workshop meeting? Okay, so we're going to, we have all received in the mail the latest version of our home business amendment. I bet that Will Evans doesn't have a copy of it, though, do you, Will?
I don't.
No. So we'll have to, well, Janelle is likely to be putting it up on a split screen.
I'll bring it up on the screen. And just to give Will the background needed and anyone else that may have missed any part of where we're at and where we're headed, just in brief, the Planning and Zoning Commission is embarking on an ambitious rewrite of the zoning regulations using the Plan of Conservation and Development, which was amended in 2020 to guide where they hope to go with the regulations. What I've been tasked to do is work on this rewrite. We've been meeting since about a year ago. And right now, what we're truly digging into are priority regulations is what we're calling it. Some regulations that we want to take a stab at modernizing and organizing and getting into the regulations quickly. Recent one was a second housing cut, and I can go into detail on various aspects of what we've done, Will, if you want at any point.
No, not right now.
Not now. No, not
Yeah,
now.
I've read both that and the home businesses. So
Great, great. And then what we're focusing on currently is the home business regulations to make sure that we're modernizing it, bringing into a work from home era, and then just keeping in mind that home businesses are intended to be accessory to residential use, and thinking through how we can ensure that there aren't adverse impacts associated with these home businesses. So we're working through a draft. We had a really productive discussion right after Christmas, and I went back to the drawing board and brought forth some updates, and this draft that's on the screen incorporates those updates. I included additional details, and then some of the underlining and the boldface is just to indicate where there has been some changes.
Okay, I'd like to just share with everybody a little tempting nugget from the internet survey preliminary results. Out of the first 150 surveys completed, 65 people indicated that in their home, they use the internet for both residence and business. So the era of doing work from home is here. Shall we go through this? Let's just go through it paragraph by paragraph.
Or let me grab that really quick. I just,
Anna, how many responses have you gotten back so far? 180?
No, 214
Oh,
as of today. So the intent and purpose paragraph is basically what Janelle said, that we recognize that people are working from home more and more. We want to make it easier for them to do so without jumping through hoops that may not be necessary. We want to make sure that the people who have businesses with a big impact on the town or on their property, that those get appropriate evaluation, and that neighbors have a chance to speak up. We're also recognizing, there it is, that it's impossible to sit here today and specifically predict what kinds of businesses people are going to have tomorrow. Our original regulation mentioned things like people staying home and making raspberry jam and then selling it. I don't think we want to get into those kinds of details, because what people did yesterday, they're not necessarily doing now, and they won't necessarily be doing tomorrow. So we have focused instead on definitions that are more general, and that's where we're up to next, right? Home office.
yes.
Could I ask if most people are comfortable with the way we have defined and handled a home office?
You know, Anna, the only thing that I'm concerned about, and it's mentioned multiple times in this document, is the noise controls.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I went on a couple of other towns to look at what they did in order to be able to define noise. And they have very specific limits of decibel, et cetera. And also, I found out that in order for a noise control or a noise rule in a town, it needs to be approved by the state. And they have no idea of what acceptable noise levels are, et cetera. And I'm wondering if maybe we don't have to do it in this document, but should we consider a noise document to be able to control all those. To be able-
Karen, I'm going to let you answer.
At the current time, Torrington Area Health is really responsible for noise. I've worked with Kathy Weber when there's been issues, including in the village, but to address noise, and I have some experience with being in New Hartford when the whole issue of the noise associated with the Home Depot came in, and it is very technical to determine noise. It has to be measured. It has to be measured with equipment that you're certified to use. It has, and I was taught years ago on noise, whatever, but I certainly do not have the capacity to do that. That's why we rely on Torrington Area Health to address noise, because noise is very different. It's the whole question, you know, a barking dog, for instance, is annoying. But if it barks, 8 hours straight as opposed to 5 times a day, is that noise? And noise is very interesting because most kind of annoying noises, like people target practicing, like in my neighborhood and whatever, does not exceed noise limits. So it's a tough thing. And at this point in time, I think that would have to be a decision as to what kind of what that's going to involve in putting a noise ordinance in the town of Cornwall and who's going to enforce it.
So hang on a minute, just to finalize this discussion, if there's going to be any kind of policy about noise, it has to be a town ordinance. So it's in the Board of Selectmen's ballpark. So we shall move on. In our case, we're just talking about excessive noise. It's a subjective issue. And I think the only way that someone who has a home office that's making excessive noise, the way to handle it is through just personal mediation by the zoning enforcement officer. I don't know of any other way. Anybody else want to speak to that?
Yeah, just so you know, Bruce, we have had issues where noise has been raised in neighborhood disputes, and we have been able to work with the health district to sort of mediate things, and that seemed to be the most, you get the whole mobile noise, which isn't regulated, like leaf blowers and chainsaws and lawnmowers, and then, anyway, we do have an agency that is familiar with enforcing noise stuff, and I think it seemed to have worked in the cases where we've sort of been able to try to tone things down and resolve a conflict there. So I don't feel extra is needed at this point, especially to put Karen in the middle of all that.
The way that I see when writing this and just having enforced zoning regulations, the way I see this rearing its head is, should someone be next to a home office, complain to Karen that there's excessive noise associated with the home office, then that does bring it into Karen as CEO to investigate to see if there is what one would qualify as excessive noise and see if the land use is within compliance. But getting into the very technical noise decibels, I just I feel that I don't want to write regulations that we cannot enforce.
And frankly, there's an interesting piece. One of the biggest issues oftentimes with noise is associated with agricultural uses. So
don't get into that.
Home office, but
well, Bruce must know about that.
But
let's
home
move on.
In terms of noise, would be
Any other comments about the home office situation? If not, let's move on to the minor home business.
Okay.
And this one probably we need to have more discussion about. As far as I'm concerned, the home office and the major home business are all pretty easy. One is not terrifically restricted and the other one is quite restricted and requires a special permit. What's different about this regulation that did not exist before was the idea of a minor home business that would have a minor impact on a neighborhood, and therefore, with the right guidance in terms of standards, could be dealt with administratively simply with a zoning permit. So this is where I think we need to focus our discussion. All right. We decided last time, no more than one non-resident employee.
Is there supposed to be limited to each of the following?
Yes, thank
Yes.
you, James. And it's also supposed to say no more than one non-resident employee, no S there.
Okay,
Great.
carry on, Janelle, take over, please.
Yeah, sure. So a minor home business, it is a small scale business which is accessory to residential use and is limited to each of the following: no more than one non-resident employee, no off-site clients are permitted other than by appointment only. The frequency of appointments is not to exceed one appointment per hour. This was a big discussion point last time. There shall be no retail sales of any kind. The home business shall not include exterior storage of materials, equipment, or vehicles. No more than 2 parking spots may be associated with a minor home business.
And do you not also later go through a bunch of other specific provisions for minor home businesses?
Yeah, correct. This is just the definition, and then there's specific provisions that are standards for each type of home business.
I have a question, Janelle, about on your definitions with the home office, you go into no excessive noise, vibration, smoke, dust, things like that, no hazards, safety. Whereas in here, that's not mentioned at all. Just for consistency, do we want to have some kind of underlying, not, you know, obviously we shouldn't have a safety hazard in anything that we do in the town.
It's all under the specific provisions.
Yeah, I just want to be consistent with how we define the separate, you know,
Yeah,
keep with the same structure.
I fully see your point, James. And this was an ask of our last meeting that I bring this into the definition of home business. When I wrote it, I felt it was understood. And then now I totally understand if you want it to be in each definition. I think it's implied. I think it's understood.
But I make a recommendation about that because I was really bothered by the fact that suddenly this regulation became so much longer because you twice write specific provisions for minor and major home businesses that are identical. I'd like a structure that says applicable to all types of home business, and then a paragraph about the noise, vibrations, smoke, dust, odors, and then applicable to minor home business. They have their list, and then applicable to major home business, and they have their list. It seems more understandable. It helps to show that this is a hierarchy of use. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It was that way, and then it got switched based on commentary from the 29th meeting. So I'd be happy to I actually like your structure better, how we would lead in with applicable to all home businesses.
Right.
We could include including home office, and then that's where we could throw in the standards with smoke and noise. And then we can lead into what's applicable in minor, and then what's applicable in major, and then follow with and what's prohibited. Mm-hmm.
That's more in keeping with the structure of the rest of our regulations.
I like that structure personally.
Yeah. Anybody opposed to what I just said? Think it sounds silly?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and James, then that will clear up the definition question that you just
Right. So it's not going to be part of the definition. It's going to be one of the standards. And it's a universal
I think from a
standard.
definition standpoint, it would be a little clearer if if it's just kind of giving people the overview of what category they're
Right.
gonna apply under.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Does
Okay,
anybody have anything more to say about the idea of one non-resident employee and 2 parking spots? My impression of that is it's pretty conservative, and I can't imagine that such a business, first of all, I can't imagine what such a business use might be, but it doesn't sound terribly impactful to me. So I mean, I guess where I'm leading is I wouldn't want us to say only 1 parking spot or to make it any more restrictive. Does anybody feel we should be more restrictive than that?
Just a quick, interesting question, because it came up in the village. I had some questions about somebody, you know, the use of a studio or whatever in the village and on some of the small lots. We have extended business parking in the GB zone to be off-site. So if somebody had a studio in the village on a small lot, would they be in violation if they had a business and didn't have enough parking, but they could park down in the common area that we have allowed other small businesses to utilize? Just a question.
No, it's a very good question. Yeah.
Is the regulation saying that they need to have 2 parking spaces, or that they can, that the maximum they can have is 2 parking spaces for the business?
Oh, the use of words. Good one, Keith.
That's what I was just, when I read it earlier today, I don't have it right in front of me right at the moment, but when I read it earlier today, I understood it to mean they could have a maximum of 2 business-related parking spaces, but maybe I misread it.
Well, we do have under the other provisions a section C on parking, which says that off-street parking is not permitted on local roads. So perhaps, did we have a different limitation on parking for major home to business? I think so, right?
Can we just say that it's 2 business-related parking spots?
no more than 2 business related. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that helps very much. Thanks. So the major home business does not use any parking in its definition. Its definition is the 4 bullets: 2 or more employees, retail sales of any kind, visits to the premises by off-site customers, clients, and or frequent deliveries and pickups. Exterior storage of materials, equipment, or vehicles associated with the business use. Could anybody come up with any other criteria that of how a business might operate in a residential setting that would move it into this concept of major that we might be missing?
A little scary in this description is the retail sales of any kind. I don't know why that's it's a little scary in any residential area to make such a broad statement. So if we
That's a good point, Bruce.
that.
Yeah, I was doing inventory of a lot of area towns with home business regulations. Many of them stipulate that the retail sales are associated with, or they're produced on site.
Right.
With something along those lines, clear that up and make it more palatable.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably appropriate. I mean,
Yeah, do we want to say that all products for sale must be produced on site?
I guess one of my questions is, like, what about the mom who sells Scentsy or something like that? Or does that fall under, because they're selling something, does that fall under a major home business? Mom who does like those home party type things and Yeah.
My understanding would be that would be more so like a temporary use, right?
Yeah, I guess, but you know, like what about the mom that's the seller, not necessarily having the parties at her house, but like she sells stuff, and what if somebody comes to pick up the product from her house? Is that then a violation of our
Oh, God.
regulations?
Only if someone complains. You know, women
Right.
are
Yeah. No, it's kind of a,
women have those kinds of sales parties for Avon products, for Agway
Right.
products. They've been doing it
Exactly.
forever, and they fly under the radar. And I think we should not touch that with a 10-foot pole, either direction.
I think,
Personally.
I think retail sales limited to just produced on site is a little limiting. If you're gonna, like, there could be some products that there's complementary things that you're just not gonna make that go with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have like, if they're doing massage and they want to sell, you know, I don't know, essential oils to take home with you or something like that, then
Good
that's
point.
not being produced on site. I think it's a little limiting.
That's a good point.
We
Hairdresser.
had extensive discussions about this when we were doing the new farm regulations for the farm stores and the farm stands. And I think we came up with the language we wound up with was something on the lines of the majority of, which is what you've just written in, Janelle. And I think that's more satisfactory.
Yep.
And if that raises questions, it's always to the discretion of the CEO and discretion of the commission to come forth with how the majority is quantified.
Right. After all, we will be discussing this in a public hearing, and there will be an extensive narrative, so we will expect to hear a little bit about what's going to be sold ahead of time. I think saying the majority is.
Yeah, and one way, should the commission wish to have further control or just an understanding, one way I have seen this regulated is if there are retail sales associated with a home business, upon applying for that special permit, which this would fall under, the property owner would have to produce a sales list. I do also see some issue with that. Should they wish to be evolving, it's one of those things. It's not going, hopefully won't be a stagnant thing. So I think, like, even I just think of Jane Harold, if we asked her, could we see a list of everything you're selling? It's just that
I don't like it.
Yeah, it creates more regulation that doesn't allow
Right.
for the business growth that hopefully will.
The whole idea is not to make the people who want to have a business in town so turned off that they go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Personally, I kind of like just under the definition side that we just say retail sales. And then either under the special permit when we're granting it or something like that is when we would restrict or find that's when we would say it's predominantly locally made, depends on what their business is.
Yeah, that
Because
would
like
define
Phil,
this-
because like what Phil said, if it's a massage, something like that, but they're only selling other associated products, none of which are made on site, that would not allow that to happen. Whereas in that case, we would want to say, okay, your main business is actually you're not making a product that you're selling, you're providing a service, but it's still enabling you to sell associated equipment, none of which is made on site.
So what about, or directly related to the primary business?
Well,
I just thinking under the definition that we can leave it looser and then under the special permit,
right.
have it more applicable to their
I think
specific
that's
case.
a good point. We put that under the special provisions or under.
What if under the definition, just to capture that, it just says
Retail sales.
limited retail sales, and those limitations being that they're produced on site or directly associated with the service?
That sounds good.
Yeah, I like that too.
Okay, sorry for this weird font that's showing up. I'll clean
Okay.
up, clean up the final version.
Most of the nutritionists I know, for example, sell vitamins.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be a nice, quiet business to have in Cornwall, someone doing nutrition counseling.
Is everyone satisfied with the frequency of the appointment only part?
That's
up
under,
above for
that's
minor.
under, for the minor.
That was our homework from last time.
Yeah, that's what I'm circling back. Mhm.
I didn't do
think
my
that's
homework.
reasonable. It sounds reasonable to me. I mean, I think we can afford to see if we start getting complaints. And then, once again, go through the process of amending our regulation. On the other hand, we may want to, if things go smoothly and people express a need for being able to have more appointments, we may want to go in the other direction. Okay, next, what? You heard a comment coming out? Can we move on to the special provisions then?
Sure. And just, they will be consolidated, so they won't be repetitive. There we
Right.
go.
The section on what is required for the application, which is B.
Yep.
Seems appropriate. We might want to include in the narrative here what is going to be for sale in the narrative, what types of products are going to be sold.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great. And I'll work this all through on my own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll fix the language.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's important to include here.
Right. When Jane Harold came before us, we got a feeling for the kinds of things she was going to be selling.
Yeah.
The section C, that we will allow a tenant to operate a business, is a new concept for this town. Is there anybody on the commission who has reservations about that?
I do.
Okay.
You know, I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people into town that are actually going to live here in order to be able to support other aspects. So I think by allowing another business to come in and operate under, you know, someone else's property is getting a little out of control. I'm worried about that.
Okay. I think an alternative argument might be that many people can't afford to live here yet. They're renting. Maybe they can afford to rent, and they have an idea for a home business, and the homeowner has no objection because it's not going to have a big impact on the home. We had a case like this. There were some people renting a home who came forward looking for a permit to open a bookstore. But our regulations wouldn't allow a tenant to do something like that. And it was in a neighborhood where I suspect things would have gone well. It would not have been a disruption. So in the spirit of inclusiveness and remembering that case, I think that's why we originally put this in.
And I think my concern was not that a renter would be renting a property and then opening a business, but that somebody owning a business could lease out their barn and allow a business to be operated in another building. That was my concern. Is that not what this would allow?
Would it be secondary to a residential use?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't allow it. I mean, unless they were living in the barn and running a business out of the barn.
Okay. All right.
You can't rent an accessory building simply for a business. in a
Okay.
residential zone.
That was my concern.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good point.
But just to clarify that point, let's just say hypothetically, a property owner has a house and they have a big barn on their lot. It's very underutilized and someone wishes to use it to do some woodworking. Are they able to rent it for the purpose of woodworking and potentially having a little home business operation on this lot that they don't own?
Hmm.
Good question.
That's what this, when in writing this, just as author, I wanted there to be flexibility for that potential. I just think of a friend of mine whose mom has an extra shed on their property and she rents it out for a potter that comes to the site just to do some work, and it's good supplemental income for her mom, and she's technically a lessee or a tenant.
Good point.
That's another good point.
Yeah.
So I guess the whole question depends on the nature of the proposed business, doesn't it?
It should be pretty
Oh, no.
consistent across the board that if there's an application for a home business, that the property owner is the one that's supportive of it and they're responsible for making sure that there's compliance. So it puts the responsibility on the property owner. With an understanding that there'll be a working relationship between their tenant that's using the property for the business purposes.
There's
That
also
may
the
be,
point just for storage that also often comes up with small contractors. They need extra space to keep some woodworking tools or something like that. I know the Grange has been well utilized for that type of thing. So that could be another issue where that person's not living on the premises. They just need extra storage space to put some of their.
Yeah, I'm going to withdraw my concern. I didn't think this all the way through. But
No, it's
well,
I had this image.
this
of
is
somebody-
why we have the discussion. Bruce.
Yeah, I had this image of somebody buying a property and leasing out the house for a massage parlor, leasing out the barn to a, and then leasing out the back 40 to I don't know, Gordon with his chainsaw on Sunday. So, but I see how it's important. It would be important for somebody, a homeowner, to be able to lease an outbuilding out to a carpenter or something like that. I think that makes perfect sense. Really good sense.
Would we have any limit on the number of businesses portable on any given property? We have not put any restrictions along that line.
So look to E, Anna, because that's where that came into
Oh, there it
play.
is. Yeah.
That was where I was thinking through flexibility of underlie space, but then to think through the cumulative effects, because it's one lot, the effect that one residential lot would be having.
Yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
obviously
didn't read this carefully enough.
It's okay. Tried to think of everything, but it's not possible. And then,
Well, then let's look at these specific provisions. Some of these are applicable also to major
Yes.
home business.
yes,
In
I'll
fact,
get rid of that
all of them.
repetition. Yes,
all of them.
yes.
Let's just all make sure that we're comfortable that we've covered all the possible angles.
So just with that whole parking limitation thought that you had earlier, Anna, did you want there to be a limitation to major home business? Did you want that to remain mute? Did you want me to?
I think the fact that we've required all parking to be on the property is protective of the town and the neighbors. And then we have included screening, the necessity for screening parking, so people don't feel like they have a secondhand car lot behind their, in their neighborhood that they have to look at all the time. Can anybody else think of any other objections to parking issues for a major home business? I think we have Have we limited the trucks, the number of trucks that can be parked?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so to get into the major home business limitations, this is where I highlighted where I just needed everyone's help was right now it's written that there's no more than 5 associated with a major home business. And that's the major home business associated vehicles and equipment storage.
So does that include employee parking as well as the business vehicles?
I'm glad you asked that question because I think it's important that we specify that.
Right.
Yeah. That's, do you think like no more than 5 vehicles associated with a major home business in addition to, or no more than 5 vehicles and parking spaces?
I think 5 is a good number for everything.
Okay.
I mean, we are talking a residential zone still. If somebody's business is bigger than that, then
On the other hand, if you think about someone who has a 5-acre lot, again, I guess since we're in new territory, we can try it. And if we stay,
So you're saying the 5 would include the people, like the residential cars as well?
no,
No.
business associated.
these are
Okay, all right.
trucks with labels.
All right, sorry, I just misheard.
Is heavy equipment included in the definition of a vehicle, for example, an excavator?
So to make sure that that was specified, under I have it say with vehicular and equipment storage.
Okay.
So that's thinking cumulatively.
All right, I think that covers it.
Yeah, I mean,
Equipment is a pretty broad definition.
Yeah, but are we just? That's interesting.
That's a good point because
is it,
somebody has some lawn mowers and things like that. Now all of a sudden, that's, I would think 5 registered vehicles.
what about equipment associated with the major
Right.
home business?
Yeah. That should definitely be included.
But does that
But
help?
I think the James's point looked at the, a landscaper or something and, it's a couple lawnmowers on a trailer,
Well, it's a trailer.
you're adding up pretty quick.
Trailer, it's a truck, 2 trucks.
2 other employees.
I think it really starts to go back to the fact that when you have discussion in terms of what you're allowed by special permit, the person that has 10 lawnmowers or 5 lawnmowers on a long piece of equipment that goes out every day, goes out once and then comes back. But the storage piece, the fact that if more and more equipment can be put undercover and not seen, it does have a very different impact on a neighborhood as opposed to having things parked outside. And contractor shop and storage, and that has always been the issue about the appearance of the vehicle and what it looks like. But a triaxle backed into a barn that is not seen unless it goes out the door and comes back in is very inobtrusive. In fact, sometimes they're in neighborhoods and people don't even know they're there.
Could we somehow use a different way of approaching this by talking about obtrusiveness and impact? That would mean that we have to consider each situation separately, depending on the particular types of materials and equipment that the business has. Some of them, like you say, might all be inside a barn, in which case, should we limit at
And
all?
This major falls under special provision, right? So
Yeah.
we get to review it. So do we need to put a limit on it, or do they have to?
No,
Or
because,
do we instead ask
Right,
them to specify in their, in their narrative what they're gonna have for equipment, and then we have a say on it when it comes to us?
correct, he can put conditions on any special permit. So maybe
so-
the language that expresses how we will be evaluating the impact on the neighborhood. What are the issues we're going to worry about? We're going to worry about
Right,
appearance, obtrusiveness, noise, comings and goings.
Right, rather than defining a certain number that we're gonna allow, it's gonna come to us anyway.
Yeah. Because, for instance, somebody is a hobby collector of cars, not a business, just a hobby collector. And there's a lot of them that have, 5 antique cars in a barn someplace. And so they've got this shed and whatever to have their vehicles. It's not a business, it's just a hobby. The same shed that could house those 5 cars is not going to look any different if there's 5 pieces of equipment, business equipment in the shed. It's going to have the same appearance. And I think that really makes a difference. And I've always felt that contract shop and storage, that storage, the whole meaning of how you store something implies that you don't see it.
Right.
I think what Anna had said was that really this should be pointed towards what it's going to look like. I think that's right. And
Yeah.
Karen, I think that's right. I think that's
Yeah.
how we should change this. I don't know how to do it though.
I have a quick thought. I have a quick thought. My quick thought is to take out these very particular arbitrary numbers that we're putting into this specific provision section and actually bring it back to what's required with the application, and then specifying that the site plan needs to include storage areas if exterior, as well as the narrative needs to include the storage of any equipment and materials associated with the home business.
So they're the things that we'll be considering.
Yeah, so that will be information required with this application.
Right, but then, if we go to a public hearing, we cannot deny a permit without citing certain criteria that we feel are not going to be fulfilled. Right?
Correct.
We can't just act in an arbitrary fashion. We
No,
have to have
you'll-
standards against which we measure the application.
You'll be using your special permit requirement criteria,
Right?
because it's through the special permit
Okay.
provision that you'd be reviewing an application of a major home business.
So what could we say about parking then in that paragraph? We just get rid of it, or all parking requirements should be discussed in the narrative?
I'm thinking out loud. What we could do here. Yeah, I see what you're saying, where you do want to have a specific provision.
I think that.
Wouldn't we just want to say that their specifications will, that we basically treat that site against what the neighborhood would allow or accommodate? So that they're not, it is a site specific, a special permit thing. If somebody's living off Route 7 versus somebody living off a backcountry road, traffic is definitely going to be different between those two settings. So we could have some kind of blanket statement saying that those provisions should be considered when granting the permit. The context in which they're, how much parking are we talking about? What's their specific site look like? Is there a way that that's going to be hidden from view from the neighbors if there's a knoll in the way? Or
Well, the narrative really needs to match the site plan, because if the narrative says that you're going to have so many vehicles that you identify, and that you're not going to see them because these are going to be parked inside at all, when they come back to the property at night, they fade into the built landscape, into barns or whatever, or they're solidly camera. But if you've got a big 10-acre lot, you could, and it's heavily forested, the appearance of of any equipment being parked outside would be different. It would be totally different than somebody who's got their equipment parked up near a road visible. But then again,
Right.
that equipment is not going to be as obtrusive as if it's in some sort of a storage building that is consistent with the neighborhood.
I think we have the drift of where we're going with this. And so because it's 8:12, I'm just going to ask Janelle to put her thinking cap on and find us some different language that will
Anna,
fix it.
can we just say reasonable number of vehicles associated with a major business will be permitted? And that leaves us the option to determine what reasonable means. If they say, look, I'm going to have 3 trucks in the barn and 1 pickup truck outside, we're going to say, yeah, that's reasonable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I can hear the lawyers now, Bruce, asking us to define reasonable.
Right. Well,
Anna, I will certainly put my thinking cap on and revisit this. My thought is that a lot of the concern, it sounds like, is coming from exterior visible storage of equipment, materials, etc. So to be sure that that gets addressed.
Right. And that way we don't have to put a limit on numbers, because if the numbers can be accommodated without offending our visual needs or our concern about exhaust or our concern about dust and noise,
Yeah.
then we can, during the special permit process, we can be flexible.
Mm-hmm. Just off the top of my head, where I'm thinking of going with this based on this discussion is that the vehicular and equipment storage associated with a home business shall be screened from public view.
Absolutely.
Being the
Yeah.
public right away.
Right.
Janelle, I know it's jumping, but it sounds like we're gonna not go on forever tonight. In section K, what was the original square footage we had?
Yeah, so we had 10,000, which
'Cause
was,
I think that was one of the big things that I sort of overheard people being a little wondrous about.
yeah, it's a large area. And my thought now when we talk about this is, if outside storage, be it this material, does that need to be screened from view as well?
I don't know. I mean,
Yes, I would say yes. We're talking about a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
It varies, of course, depending
Okay.
on what the storage is. I keep huge piles of compost and mulch in my driveway all summer long as I gradually move them around.
not
My neighbors
2,000
haven't
square feet.
complained.
I think there are a limit. This weekend I was driving by on Swallow Hill Road, an arborist up there who probably had a half acre of logs piled, I don't know, 10, 12 feet high. Freaked me right out, thinking that this could happen. I think the 2,000 is a limited area and screening it should be easy.
Well, cordwood operations can be huge and they're agricultural in residential zones.
It's not part of this anyway.
So we don't have anything to say about that.
Been down that road and it was the lumber trucks coming in and dropping off the logs and the creation of cordwood. It was horrible
Uh-oh.
to deal with. And guess
So
what?
are you saying that's an agricultural business?
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
Firewood?
State definition, Bruce. State
Okay.
definition.
Yikes.
Moving on, prohibited home businesses. We're going to go through this, then we'll have a little public commentary.
We skipped J if anybody cares.
Yeah, really quickly, just those hours in J, are those appropriate? Those are,
I just don't think Sunday should be a day where you're allowed to operate, but not for religious reasons.
I don't have a problem with Sundays. Personally. I mean,
I think it's a sad commentary on our society that people can't afford to take a single day off.
it's not that. Sometimes it's just trying to keep up with the amount of work that there is out there. Just trying to keep up with it. You got to work Sundays.
You know, Phil, when we worked on Sundays at the greenhouse, what we did was we knew we weren't supposed to be working, so we were really, really quiet.
Yeah.
Then you have nothing to say about this.
Right.
Man, we're not talking about, I mean,
Yeah.
I could be as noisy. I could be noisier than a home business in my barn where I'm sitting now. If I go downstairs and fire up the planer,
Yeah.
and that's just for hobbies.
Right.
And
Let's
there's
leave
no,
that for now.
and there's nothing that says I can't go start my lawnmower at 6 a.m.
If we had, at our next public hearing, we'll get some feedback about this. If people are objecting,
I
severely.
think it's a
then-
good starting place for the hours.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the whole reason for regulations is to make people respect each other, because the regulatory process and a special permit process shows that you have to put your cards on the table and you have to follow them. And that's the big issue with special permits is an open conversation and a good conversation, that if somebody comes in for a special permit, that they understand that if they want to make their business survive, there might be a point that they have to move out of the neighborhood because it isn't going to, and that you can't, that at some point they're obtrusive in a neighborhood. But special permits are really based on respect. And when you go back to the character of the neighborhood, if neighbors are respectful of each other, businesses will do much better.
Right.
I think also people should remember too that Mike Root and Denny Frost, who were both served on the Planning and Zoning Commission and were well-established contractors, had to take all their equipment out of Cornwall and to go to neighboring towns to store it because there was no place that was available in town. So we don't want to get to that point.
No, we do not. It's a good point.
That's an important thing. I think also the unfortunate reality for a lot of self-employed people too is they have to meet with clients on Sunday. So if we get too uptight about our hours and then somebody's got to drive to meet a client in a truck, I mean, we don't want to get overly ridiculous with the economy we have now. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people work Sundays. I mean, that's the deal. If you want to stay here, you gotta do it when it's good.
Some people would rather take Mondays off than Sundays too.
Right. And they don't work on a rainy day.
And then
Can't
the
regulate
stores
it
are
all.
open when you want to take the day off.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've given up on restricting the days.
Do we just take Jay out? Do we need Jay?
Point.
Do we ask in
Jay
the
is about
special
the
permit
hours.
section? Do we ask in the special permit description for them to describe their hours of operation, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if that's actually better for us overall, so that we actually have something to stand on if their proposed hours of operation aren't maybe applicable for the site they're talking about. That we just, in other words, if we spell out when their hours can be of operation here, then that's a blanket statement that everybody's kind of entitled to. Whereas if we leave it out, we make them put it in the special permit application, and then we can have a little more leeway in terms of what's maybe appropriate or inappropriate for their setting.
But once again, we have to have standards. We have to set some criteria to judge that.
Yeah, but that's the
by.
whole thing. Like with a special permit, there aren't standards because it's a special permit, or that it's something that's outside of what our zoning allows. They're coming before us and saying, hey, I want to do this business. I know it's not a business zone, but this is what we'd like to do. And then we have to look at their criteria that's very specific for that site and say, okay, you can do this business here.
Good point.
It's not the same legality that say it's the same rules for everybody, because we specifically don't allow this. This is a special permit application only.
Good
So I
point.
think we
I
do have a
will-
footing.
Yeah. I will remind the newcomers that in many regulations, special permit is referred to as special exception, which has a flavor of what you're saying. Thanks for reminding me, James.
So do we take it out? And address it with the special permit?
Yeah,
Sure.
I would take out a lot of the specifics maybe just so that we have a little more leeway to, and that way we're not tied into a specific,
Concept.
timing or size or concept. It really is something that we say, okay, if you want to do this specific business under these hours, it's going to look like this, you're allowed in this setting. And then we go back and we can still give our reasons, because of the setting, because of the amount of land that they have, the screening, they can make it work. But if somebody has 60 acres and they're off in the backwoods somewhere, and it's not going to impact anybody else, do we want to limit them to say that they can only have 5 trucks or 2,000 square feet of A, B, and C? It seems like we might want to take it more case by case with the special permit.
Oh my God.
And
You
Not
just
even-
erased most of our legislation here.
Sorry.
I think the other side of the coin is, and I've encountered this from personal experience, when you're evaluating some of these special use buildings, it's very helpful to have criteria to get an idea and get comfortable with the risk associated with executing on the plan that you're thinking about. So having like a general range, like am I way out of bounds or am I way off the map in terms of my expectations of use, can be helpful when you're trying to make a decision about starting a business or making an investment in town.
it's a good
Makes sense.
point. Yeah,
I think that's a good idea, Will, because that's the other thought I had was that if you put some general standards like your number of 5 or your hours or whatever, you say these are what we generally expect this to be, but there will be, certain sites in town can accommodate more or less or whatever. So you set some standards, but if somebody feels I have a business that can be, that nobody knows is even to be there, why not let them make that proposal and qualify it? But at least you set some ideas of the scope and scale that you're thinking about.
yeah. The purpose of zoning regulations is to have a reasonable understanding of the potential use of your property. And with these provisions in place, it also can do away with some of the inconsistent results that we see from special permit. Because these regulations will be written today, and then years from now, a potential whole new body of people can be enforcing them. And the more that's specifically spelled out for them, the better that they can read our intent of what's behind that, so that it doesn't lead to 2 very, very similar home businesses in 2 different parts of town that are operating completely differently because of whether it's the way the public hearing went that night or the commission that was volunteering for the town at that point in time. I think just making sure that there's enough of a reasonable expectation for not only the applicant, but also for the potential neighbors of these home businesses, so that the limitations do get clearly spelled out. Discretion is a good thing, but it can also get commissions into trouble.
Yes.
Good point. So that's all a muddle. I don't think we're going to sort it out tonight. But my goodness, it's been a really fantastic discussion. Thank you to everybody. I'm half brain dead, so I get to decide that we're moving on. We're going to move on. There are some people, I don't know if they're still on, Janelle, or if they've given up on us, but I do want to offer a period of public commentary. I guess they all left.
Before I'm out.
The
So
only-
we'll let them know on the agenda at the next meeting that they will be able to have some commentary.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
And that is, James, where are you right now?
I am in Puerto Rico.
Okay, okay. I was saying now, either he's got a window open, or I keep on hearing this noise that sounds like the sea. But I think you've got the prize for maybe the longest Zoom commute to a Cornwall meeting, and I think
Certainly
that
with the
should
Planning and
somehow.
Zoning Commission, I think we got that one covered.
Yeah, I think I think you've got it pretty good there, but I think it also shows, this is a new world, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, show us the ocean, James.
Let's see, here's my little cabana. Not much.
Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. We're not feeling sorry.
Let's see if we can.
You were
While
here.
he's doing that,
Others wearing masks. It's in a really good place. Peaceful, calm, and safe.
look at all that
I
green.
don't know if you can still see any of that.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see the white.
My little cabana. Got some almond trees. We don't want to rub it in, but come on down.
He's right
There you
there.
go. All right.
Yeah.
Given that we're having a regular meeting in February and a special town meeting, I think I'll not ask you to have any more special workshop meetings for now. I'm sure
Anna,
you'll be
Anna,
happy to hear that.
Did we want to
Yeah.
post that February meeting? Did we have discussion earlier, or did you all have discussion earlier that maybe this meeting should be posted or written up in the Chronicle so that people know that it's going on?
That's,
Yeah,
that's
we
got-
did mention that.
tomorrow.
We did. Yeah, Karen's gonna do that.
Do we have to do any work in preparation for the meeting?
Janelle is offering to do a summary of what we're working on, i.e.
Is that all we have to
See,
do?
this meeting has been so long, everyone's forgotten what we talked
Is
about.
that all, no, is that all we have to do for organizing the meeting?
Well, Karen's gonna take that on.
It's much more organizing the people that we're inviting to come to the meeting and making a good forum for them to be able to talk, or if they don't put information, be able to put information into the record and have that up on the website. So, and then combine it all, which is what you can do very successfully with young people that know what they're doing, unlike us.
Can we have them submit video
All of
presentations?
this stuff together and,
What did you say, Phil? I'm sorry.
We want to allow them to submit video presentations if of their stuff, because I could probably help compile that some, unless we got somebody else that's willing to do it.
Well, why don't we see what kind of feedback Karen gets about people's availability and willingness?
But therein lies the question, if you're willing to do that, I'm willing to put that in the, what goes in the Chronicle, because maybe somebody would want to do a video presentation and then we put it in and then then you mush everything together somehow.
Gordon, who did the two Thanksgiving, the
Talent show.
ones? Who did the compilation?
Oh, well, Fred Thaler pulled it together and Nick O'Neill did the video. Steve's
Fred?
grandson.
Okay.
You
So,
talk about that afterwards, because
No,
I
I
will.
was just wondering if there was a resource there that we might be able to tap.
well, is Richard still here? Richard Griggs, he's Mr. Video guy, so
He's on.
he's there. So, I mean,
All right.
he usually can cover. But I think this
I'm
is
available.
so,
I can do whatever you want.
I'll be down in Puerto Rico with James, so
Hey.
we'll get
No.
But
Yeah.
this is so easy.
Zoom.
Yeah, let's do it.
One thing I wanted to ask for the commission as I prepare and also to wrap my head around what's next is priority regulations that are coming after this home business chunk. Are we going to go back to the greater comprehensive regulations or continue on smaller bits?
Leave that as homework for us all, would you?
Okay, yeah.
Want
Great.
out. I want out. It's time to end the meeting.
All right. I think it's good.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Bill
Okay.
made the motion, James seconded it. All in favor, just say aye and turn it
Aye.
off.
Okay. Happy New Year.
Thank
Happy New
you.
Year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Jill.
Bye,
Anna.
Yes.
Thank you.